AfCFTA Secretariat and AfCFTA Bank that will facilitate transaction in the AfCFTA market. You can make your transaction in the local currency, and then the receiver will also receive their money in their local currency. And the cost of settlement is going to be minimal. It's not as it is today. Because we know in Africa, about 42 currencies, and most of them are not convertible. You cannot take Kenyan shillings and go to Ghana, expect to pay Kenyan shillings on the market. They will not recognize it. They will say, no, we don't know this. So that challenge of non-convertibility of currency can affect business. So you have to change your currency to US dollar, then you reach the country, again you convert the US dollar in the local currency, and there is double loss on transaction cost. And then if you are trading, the whole profit is gone into the transaction cost. So the PAPS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, will bring two things. One is saving time, because transaction will be done in a very short period of time. They have set a maximum of 24 hours, and also saving on the cost of transaction, because the currency convertibility will be done immediately without going through a foreign currency. The other important element that you have to know is the mechanism that has been put in place to eliminate non-tariff barriers. It is already applicable in East Africa. Now we have a continent-wide LTB's elimination mechanism, which is already available on online. If you go to tradebarriers.africa, you will be able to access all the information about that mechanism. You'll be able to use it. You'll be able to report any non-tariff barrier that you have in the course of doing business. And the LTB will be resolved eventually by the system that has been put in place. I can talk about many other things, but I want to encourage you as well to be part of the Intra-African Trade Fair. We have the Intra-African Trade Fair, IATF. It is started in 2018 in Cairo. The second edition was in Durban in November 2021. Now the third edition will be in Abidjan in November 2023. So we will have that Intra-African Trade Fair every 2 years. It's very important for private sector to understand. The Intra-African Trade Fair is a marketplace. It's a platform where you meet and make business deals on a number of things. So I would encourage those who know the value of the trade fair not to miss any IATF, Intra-African Trade Fair. So with those few remarks, I hope, I would like to end my statement and thank you very much for inviting me and wish you a fruitful deliberation. I will not be here with you because I have other engagements, but when I'm released, I will vacate the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother Pudas. I think he has given the context and where we are in terms of the tools. I hope you noted down the 20 tools that are required to start trading. And the rules of origin being one of the key to trade. So again, he has mentioned, and I'm happy my brother from South Sudan is here, that for EAC to benefit from the CFTA, we need to fast track South Sudan ratification of the agreement. Otherwise, it will be a challenge for the region to reap the benefit that are provided under the CFTA. Again, as I said, that we are privileged that EAC will have a donor is no longer donor. Trademark is a part of the integration process, and they are keen, very keen to support us, to work together, and navigate through that journey, so that we are able to make an impact, a positive impact through trade and investment within the region and within the continent. So allow me to invite the director in charge of business competitive, Maria Natalia, to deliver our remarks. Karibu sana Natalia.
Good morning once again. My name is Anatolia Wakaria. I am the Director of Business Competitiveness within Free Market Africa. I head the private sector support portfolio covering our Women in Trade program, private dialogue program, and export capability, which covers farm-level support to businesses and logistics services. Thank you to the Executive Director of EABC, Mr. Alisa, and our distinguished guests, who we are very happy to have here based on his expertise, for convening this session, strengthening the private sector voice and participation in the continental integration process, and then being able to benefit from the agreement. As Mr. Sivan mentioned a few minutes ago, and what I picked most was the fact that information is key. A lot is happening and a lot is being done on behalf of the private sector. So from trademark perspective and other development partners, we've noticed that some lessons, especially within the East African community, the importance of having a private sector-led process, because that ensures sustainability and it ensures that whatever opportunities have been identified and are being put in place based on the framework that has been developed, that the private sector is able to effectively reap and benefit from it. So the key thing is how then are we empowering the private sector? As such, here today, in the process of ratification, the tools that have already been submitted by the different countries, what is required at a political level in terms of different countries moving at the same pace. For me, how then does this go back to the private sector? How do we proactively make sure that the private sector is at the forefront of this? Because at the end of the day, if this is happening on an ad hoc basis, it's happening ad hoc meaning the information sharing. So ensuring that there is a structured mechanism in which information is translated downward to the private sector, and ensuring that they have a seat at the table where tools are being developed, negotiations are taking place, is extremely important. That's the first point. The second point is we are looking to move together as a bloc. We've made quite significant progress with the ESG integration process. How then do we leverage and use the lessons that we've learned? A lot of the tools on rules of origin, MTBs, have certain challenges and difficulties within the current context of the EAC community. It is our hope that we are not picking the same issues and translating them at a continental level. So how do we develop mechanisms to share lessons and ensure that these lessons are implemented from what has been learned by the different trades? Because any tool that is developed is only as good as how well it's implemented. So an NTP monitoring system or a reporting system is not useful if it takes 3 months to actually resolve an issue. So how do we make sure that these systems that are being developed actually work and take into consideration the different contexts within the continent itself? So we want to be one, but realistically speaking, business happens in different ways, cultural practices take have a lot of impact on how things actually run. So how then do we make sure that this doesn't impede the successful and effective implementation or usage or action of the tools that are being developed? Within trademark, we've committed to supporting integration, whether it is at a regional level, EAC, southern countries, or the whole of Africa. but also looking at how then we support the implementation of the CFTA. We have recently launched a program in the Secretariat that covers support on the implementation of the CFTA and also takes trademark to West Africa. So a lot of the strides that have been made within East Africa, when you get to West Africa, you actually are able to see the difference and how far ahead we are. So my push to the Secretariat and also to EABC as they lead the engagement with the private sector and other reps is how then we show them what we've done well, while also taking what works well within their different countries. The private sector is key, not just in this region, but at a continental level, because at the end of the day, you drive the economy. The CFTA will only be as successful as how well the private sector is able to do. Us getting down to practicality, moving from just tools and sensitization to practical market linkages, identification of business opportunities. The trade fair that Mr. Ferrari has mentioned is a good opportunity. We are very keen to ensure that whatever support trademark provides, for example, to EABC, also links to that we support an advocacy program, but we are also looking at how we strengthen market and investment opportunities for EABC members and other private sector players that are operating in the region. So as we sit here and internalize a lot of the documentation and the tools that have been developed, let's also start thinking about how we practically strengthen the linkages at market level, investment level, but also making sure that the financial tools and instruments that are being developed work well for us. Lastly, it's just to urge and put forth the importance of digital tools and digital systems to enhance awareness creation and sensitization. Because at the end of the day, we can't fly everyone to our workshop in Nairobi or to Dar or to Ghana. And then how then we leverage digital tools to ensure that that information is out there for you to digest and you to implement into your business. And as we develop tools also, how do we also pick up digital versions of those tools? So certificate of origin, for example, are being issued at a digital level in the EAC. It would be sad for us to go back to paper-based certificates that require verification and numerous procedures for those to actually then be accepted. So as we move forward with the tools, let's also look at other complementing versions that will make it easier for us to do business in Africa. With that, I'll end there, and thank you, Mr. Khalifa, for the opportunity to speak at the workshop. I wish you all very good deliberation.
Now, I think it is high time now that our ED, Mr. George Kosokalisa, to officially open the meeting.
Again, a very big round of applause for our two guests and partners, key partners. Again, as I said in the introduction, that these are valuable partners in whatever we're doing. Trademark, the CFTA Secretariat. I invited products. We had two last week, a whole week, with the CFTA Secretariat, looking at the legs. How do we share lessons? We called it Legs Coordination Meeting. Bring SADC, UNESA, ECOWAS, ECAS, all 8 legs that are represented by African Union, to chart the path of how we benefit from the CFTA. I'm happy to say that through such engagements, the East African Business Council, and even yesterday I was with the president of the African Business Council, they want us to drive this region. To drive the region, drive the continent in terms of engaging our private sector, very dynamic private sector, For the interest of our guest speakers, let me say that the way EABC works, we do have our national focal points, and they are represented here. ESFU, EPSF, Enterprise Sector, South Danchebo, all are here. But in addition, we have industrial players, and I wanted to recognize the Safari Group. You can stand up for. They have been very, very, very vocal, not only investing in East Africa, taking interest, investing in East Africa, but investing, they even have a strong appetite to take advantage of the continental level. The same for East African growers. I saw the representative from East African growers. When you look at the, let's please stand up. So when you look at the CFTA, and I want to again to thank brother for the CFTA to be very successful, it should anchor on strong private sector engagement. That is the key. During the 2 weeks when we identified 5 key areas that are very critical. One, to have digital value chain, which will feed into continental value chain. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's not about advocacy, but what product are we taking today? The continental level, are we prepared? Regional value chain, ESC regional value chain. That is very, very critical in my remarks that let's look into our countries, our farm level, what our competitiveness strengths, what strengths we have, which products can we compete, and what are those guiding constants that we can work together to address. The second important aspect that I wanted to share with you is that industrialization add value to our products. From the study done by the CFTA and World Bank indicated that the biggest benefit from the CFTA, they are those countries that add value to their products. Manufacturing products will gain more value because, and that's why the jobs are created. So the job creation will be generated through value addition, through industrialization. Then the partnership, public-private partnership, is very critical. And I'm happy to say that our leaders have, as the products have highlighted, have given us the wisdom, political wisdom. They have identified our women, they have given a way, they have shown us the way. It is now up to the private sector, it is up to EABC and our national focal points, our members, to drive this intervention agenda at the level. I wanted also to highlight in terms of the instruments, products mentioned that there are 5 key instruments for us to start trading. And I know we have a good expert with us here in this room, and they will take you deep into those instruments. One was rules of origin. You cannot, we always say, rules of origin is the passport for the product. It defines economic nationality of the product. If you are Ugandan, it is your passport. Whether there is no border, it is your passport that shows your identity. It's the same for the product. That's why, from here, this perspective, and again through trademark, that we gave prominence, key prominence on rules of origin to be our first, to ensure that all our members from agriculture, from manufacturing, from the they need to understand the rules of origin. That's very critical. How ESC rules of origin, even the ESC rules, they have a number of challenges. But now we are going into continental rules of origin. How do I align ESC rules of origin to the continental rules of origin? Products say 87.7% have been aligned or harmonized. So it means that now most of our products falls under 87.7%. What are those products? that meets those criteria. You know, the rules of origin have two criteria: foreign produced goods and those that goes through substantial transformation. And that is manufacturing. Because you need to add value to justify that this is a product. Like in a Safari group, you can confirm that this is an East African product because you've added a certain amount of value to that product to benefit from the continental rules of origin. That is the critical instrument. The second one that is very critical is tariff concession, which I'm happy to say that ESC, I don't know when we are going to get that, so that everybody has that. And that's what Natalia said. How do we put those instruments online so that everybody can access them? And I think having an e-gazette also would be an important tool for everybody to access, because EABC cannot reach to everyone. And again, you have also those small and medium enterprises who need to understand those rules of origin. Currently, we brought the green to the private sector. But there are others, and I'm happy the chairman of CASITA. CASITA, how many members do you have? 200. 210. So you see, CASITA is one of the 210,000. 210,000. 210,000. And those are micro, small, and medium enterprises. So this one you also understand the rules of origin. Then, as I said, tariff concession, which ESC already has achieved 90.2%. I don't know whether it will be adjusted to 90, because that's also my question. Yeah? Because the threshold is 90, but ESC tariff offer is 90.2%, and we are good. Again, with the caveat, a strong caveat that South Sudan has not ratified. What does it mean? I think my brother will shed more light how we can trade without South Sudan. Yes? And if there is any other rule that will help us, but the consultants are here, will also shed more light. Another important aspect too, which I have shared and which is in line with what we've been using, is the NTB online portal. Yesterday, I was with him in the same workshop with the UN, UNECA. He showed us how the portal works. And one of the issues now is the portrait from Uganda to Kenya. It is already on the portal. Kenya arbitrarily said that the eggs from Uganda should not enter. That shouldn't happen. It is highlighted as one of the challenges. So how do we resolve that? The speedy resolution of that NGB, and on being time bound, because there are losses, business people are losing. Those who invested in it, portrait, those who are trading, the transporters, it is the entire value chain. It is the loss. And that's my question to him, to everyone says, how can even the portal quantify the losses? My sister there had an issue in Rwanda with her machine, and we intervened through RDP. But she quantified the losses just for 10 days. So I almost put in $2,000 just for the forklift to lift, to offload the iron sheets. So you see this NTB, then again saying that NTB is one of the challenges in the region at the ESC and at the continental level. We must have a solution, a strong and actionable solution how we address these NTBs. Because they are emerging, they are new ones, they are recurring, and they have impact on trade. They have impact on our integration again. So again, let's come up with a very strong tool in terms of addressing those NGOs. But the key ones to me, and my experience in dialogue, and private sector, we need to knock on the doors of politicians in terms of addressing these NGOs. There is another important tool, maybe I also put at this education, is what they call trade observatory. It's very critical because you can track your trade with your counterparts in terms of market access, in terms of value of your product. That portal is up and running. Myself and we brought on board ITC to train most of our members how to access that portal. It's up and running, and I encourage you to also visit that portal. We are planning another training on how to access that information, because It gives you even how you calculate NGBs. If you want to export a product, the different kind of these are the NGBs. And the NTMs, non-tariff measures that your product will be subjected to. So I think that is also another important tool that we need to continue using. Again, the reason why we are here, it is also to share experience and your insight, not only at the continental level, but at the EAC level. Currently, we have agreed, and we pushed, EABC pushed, again through your consultation. Number of you, when you are here in March, when we pushed for the common external tariff, a forced value structure to protect our domestic industries, our different industries. This region has become a dumping ground for products from China, from India. So they are really distorting our market. I'm happy that the Ministers of Trade, Minister of Finance, we had a retreat in Mombasa in May, and they have agreed that they raise the common external tariff for those products we have comparative and competitive advantage to a high rate, which is 35%, from 25% to 35%. And the task they gave me saying, okay, we've raised it, but do you have capacity to produce those products? So we need to demonstrate the capacity, and I'm happy that the Association of Manufacturers are here. So it is a call on you to demonstrate that those products can be produced in terms of quality and in terms of price. Quality and price, I want to insist on those two. Quality and price, because that was the challenge, that was the argument. Some countries say, no, we want to defend EAC products, but they are substandard. They don't meet the quality. And leave also being the substandard, but even in terms of price, they're more expensive than it. Someone was telling me that the rice from Pakistan is more expensive than rice produced in Tanzania. And again, he said it's almost 50%. Pakistan rice is cheaper than Tanzanian rice. What of NGP we put on Tanzanian rice? Or maybe even the restriction from the supplier themselves. So those are the discussion we want to share with you and work with you and see how we can do it. Otherwise, I want to really thank you, appreciate our partner for this constructive engagement. Allow me again on a special note to thank Trademark. This is the first engagement, but we are going to have also country. We are going, and I'm sending the message. We are going to have country engagement. This will not end in Nairobi. We are going to, through their support, we are going to go to each of the EAC partner states to sensitize, raise awareness, train the private sector on how to take advantage of the CFTA. As Santini, the school side.
Thank you very much, as officials, for very impressive remarks. The good things, as I said here earlier, our meeting is a technical meeting, and I think the consultant was very much worried about the time, but I think he have made his work very easy, because for me, I think maybe we have done almost the session which is supposed to follow. After this one, I think we will highlight some of the challenges in each of the instruments to elaborate actually what our high table has expressed. Now I think we are going for a group photo. Yes.
Before group photo, again, for the interest of if there are any valid questions to an Italian product, they will not be here after the group photo. So anyone will, because we have a case organization, wanted to give them opportunity to ask them few questions, because they will not come back here.
Okay. Since we have given a very golden chance, so anyone who has a question, be very brief and put that to the who you want to address.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prudence. Thank you, CEO. Yes, My name is Walter Kamau, trade advisor for Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and I'm in this game. And today, I really want you to go for a very easy question. I want the timelines for these instruments, even the rules, even these rules of holding assessment, and what are we going to do now in we have done 8737. The main balance to make 100 is the most critical products. We are looking, for example, the chapter from textile cotton. And when you look at the meetings which are going on, the convergences, the divergences in the procurement code will never finish. I've done at the subcommittee level, at the committee, training group level, and then the senior officials level. And I was also asking what magic are they going to do when they convert them to senior officials level if they cannot even agree as a committee and at committee level. So, and then what are you going to do about that assessment? Because what the businesses are saying, yes, you have been telling us this story, you have done it, you have agreed on it before. When are you going to present those rules of origin? What are the timelines? And that's very important so that we can announce that to the businesses. What are the timelines also for the people? Yes.
Let me hear at least 3 questions first.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Clive Ayuko. I represent the Western Africa. My question is quite simple. We have emerging threats to things like the continental free trade area. One is perhaps the COVID-19. When it came, countries clamped down. It was actually rational choice economics with countries. My interest comes first, the interest of my people come first. So in terms of mitigating strategies towards emerging realities like COVID-19, what are you likely to do as the East African Business Council and perhaps the East African Free Trade Area? Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is John Momo. I'm a journalist. I have a question regarding the countries which have signed the agreement. You said 54 out of 55 countries have signed the agreement with an exemption of Eritrea. I would like to know why Eritrea has not signed. Then my second question is on the declaration of origin of goods. What actions will you take against those who lie when declaring the origin of the goods? And my last question is about the IATF. We say the third edition will be in Abidjan in 2023. When will it be coming to the East African community?
We can also answer questions from you.
Good morning. My name is Maria Lima from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And I'm happy you talked about NTBs, which is actually affecting us in EAC. Right now, I think it is affecting us, and in a way, it is distorting our trade. Now, we are going to a bigger market, the biggest animal. So, how can we handle those particular challenges to ensure that it is not actually affecting trade, just like the way it is affecting us right now? We have instruments, yes, but how then do we ensure that each one of us implements and enforces what is required of us to avoid these particular challenges that we are going through? Another thing is the issues of the market access. And you talked about some products being substandard, standards, quality products. Then how are we going to address those particular challenges? Because others are just allegations. And at times governments can act on allegations. Then how do we address such concerns to ensure that actually everything is moving smoothly to avoid any interruptions? Thank you.
Okay, maybe Dr.
Yeah, thank you very much. Some Untitled from Corporation for the Industry. Now, it's a technical advisor and I'm there the trade, director of trade and whatever, etc. etc. When we go to the continent as a group, basically as a group or PAC group, but while you know that internally we have our own issues here, we are not kind of very coherent. some of the NGVs that we have in the EAC are really very unnecessary, in my opinion. Some of this mistrust. I mean, we say we're integrating and yet we don't trust each other. Maybe you should advise us to just settle ourselves domestically before we move to the next point. That's what I'm saying. I'm sure you know this. And it is a challenge to us who are integrating. That for all these years, since 1999, you see, the EAC Part 2. Because EAC Part 1 was very good. Much better than the EAC Part 2 now. And I'm glad to have one over here. Because remember in 2001, we went to the CARICOM to learn from them. They told us they learned from us. First is in fact, they told us to go and read our constitution. And they just implement what that constitution said. Don't need it to start doing any more studies because the solution was beginner. So they copied us, they took our constitution, they just changed the EAC to CARICOM. Nothing else. And they are moving forward. And one of the things they told us, what you might be from 20 years ago, they said that unless you have trust with each other, you're wasting time trying to integrate. You must trust each other. Unless you have reasons to the contrary. Sansa.
Thank you very much. Maybe we start.
Interesting. Let me start with a good statement that was made at the end. I'll speak to the other statements. No. I'm sure you're doing business. The issue of trust, yes, is very important to resolve. But you have to understand, I think East African community have done a lot in integration process. I happen to be a negotiator of the ESC Common Market Protocol. And when we were negotiating the protocol, the first thing that we did was to undertake a study tour to the European Union Commission and then to ECOWAS. And one of the things that we're learning there, including in ECOWAS, the free movement of persons. Now that I live in West Africa, everyone in West Africa wants to be like East Africa, especially when it comes to movement of persons and everything that we are doing to integrate the EAC market. So I think East African community, we are a model. We are already a role model for the continent when it comes to integration, if not in the world. I think that one we should be happy. Kamau, you have challenged me with specific questions. Let me start with the one of rules of origin. For the rules of origin, when we say it's 7.7% having been covered, I think it's only 3 products that are pending, and you have mentioned textile and cotton. The amount of work that has not been done on textile and cotton alone covers 10.6% of the entire list of products that are traded on the continent. So if you take a 7.7%, you add 10.6% of textile, you're already 98 point something percent. Then 1 point something percent is on the automotive industry, some parts of automobile, not all of them, that are still being discussed, and 0 point something on sugar. So those are the only things that are being discussed on rules of origin that have not been concluded. So I understand textile is a big issue. I can't give you a deadline. Negotiations are going on. Private sector is engaging actively. Actually, the reason why government don't reach a consensus is because of the push and pull from private sector. So I think we will at some point come and sit with negotiators and tell them what you want. You want to protect cattle? Do you want to protect Made in Africa? Or do you want to continue importing? Because most of us, we continue importing from outside because we have not been able to promote our textile industry on the continent. So the 10.6% which is remaining on textile is a lot for trade. And there are many people who are doing business only in textile. So that one has to be done. I will not tell you a deadline, but I think one of the priorities that we have on table is to conclude all outstanding issues on rules of origin. And the head of state had given us up to end of June to conclude all of them. Unfortunately, those that have mentioned, the three of them are still pending. Textile, some auto parts, and some elements of sugar. The publication of e-tariff book and rules of origin manual is going to happen in July. We have actually set a deadline to do it on the 1st and 2nd of July because that's when we have planned the Council of Ministers. All these instruments have to go to the Council of Ministers. So now the Council of Ministers will take place in July. The dates are yet to be decided, but as soon as we have the Council of Ministers, then those instruments will be published because they are ready. But we can only make them public when they have been officially approved. So I hope that by end of July, we will see all of them on the website. The AfCFTA Rules of Origin Manual and the AfCFTA e-tariff. But countries will also have to fulfill their own requirements to publish them and gazette them. The AfCFTA Secretary will not gazette anything. We will take what has been gazetted and post them on our website for the general public. One difficult question is why is Eritrea not signing? It's a very difficult question and a political one. Yes, we have done a number of political engagements with Eritrea. We know some of the reasons that push Eritrea not to sign, but we are still negotiating with them, trying to make them understand the value of AfCFTA markets, the value of trading with the continent, because for them, their political ideology might be different from the political ideology of other African countries. And you know they still have issues that they're resolving with their neighbors. And they thought, if you have not resolved issues with your neighbors, then how can you use your neighbors as a gateway to the rest of the African continent? I think Eritrea now is trading more with the eastern parts of the world than with Africa, because they are surrounded by neighbors with whom they still have issues, including Ethiopia. There were, I think, three specific questions from you, the journalist.
Yes.
The second one was?
The second one was about declaration of the origin of goods.
Yes, if someone doesn't tell the truth.
Yes.
And the third?
The third was about the IATF third edition, which will be
When
happening.
is it coming to East Africa?
Yes, when is it coming to East Africa?
Okay. That one is the easiest. The IATF started in North Africa, in Egypt, went to South Africa, in Durban. When it went to South Africa, it was supposed to be in Ghana in 2020, September 2020. Then with the COVID, it was not supposed to take place. And the process is supposed to take place every 2 years. It took more than 2 years to take place. And then it was opened up to all other African countries that will get ready first. That's when South Africa happened. Because other countries were still struggling to fight COVID, then they said, okay, we might be ready to host it in 2021, and they grabbed it. Then it went to South Africa. immediately after South Africa, West Africa had already submitted their bid. It's now going to Abidjan, meaning that we are having Central Africa and East Africa remaining. So it will go to East Africa or Central Africa next, but at the end, it will also be in East Africa because it is rotation. So from north, south, west, maybe east and central, and then it will continue to rotate. But I hear some countries are now positioning themselves to host it. Let me take your question of, I think there are two things that can happen if you have lied on the declaration of origin. The first thing that is that when you are discovered, your product will not enter the market. That's number one. Then there will be administrative measures that will be taken against you. But when it reaches a level where, for example, you have abused the market, and then you are discovered later on, I think that can be subject to dispute settlement. We already have a dispute settlement mechanism that is working, the first of its kind in Africa. If there is any dispute whatsoever in the AfCFTA, then it will be taken to the dispute settlement body and it will be resolved. I think this one can answer directly or indirectly also the question that was raised by Madam there at the back. The issue of standards, we are working with ARSO, Association of Regional Standardization Organization, which is in Nairobi. We have a comprehensive action plan to develop AfCFTA standards. I know they have done a lot of work in East Africa, so we also have a comprehensive work program to agree on the standards for the AfCFTA market. Of course, they will mirror the international standards, but the standards will not be the problem. So we are working on them. There is already a legal instrument on the standards. Yes, that one I have left it to JP, because what we know for sure is that the COVID challenge and the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, they have impacted or disrupted the global value chains. I mean, the supply chain globally has been disrupted. Those who used to depend on importation from outside or export to the rest of the world have definitely been affected by either COVID or other conflicts in the world. So that was a strong signal for us to integrate more, because in times of COVID, you could either rely on yourself or on your neighbor. So if you don't take measures, feed East Africa as East Africans, you will not be fed by Europeans or by Chinese. So I think one of those challenges has taught us that we have to integrate more. We have to make our efforts. And more importantly, this is a message which I forgot. When I always talk about AfCFTA, we tend to believe that it is a market. But what are we going to put on the market? That's where the issue of production, or productive capacity comes in. What are we doing as private sector to make sure that we do substitute everything that we have been importing from outside the continent? What are we doing? Currently, the level of intra-African trade is very low, 18%. There is this opportunity of producing more than 70% for the continent. So what are we doing to do that? Because after 5 years or 10 years, when tariffs will have been reduced and non-tariff barriers will have been eliminated, then consumers will ask you where are the products from the continent. If you don't have them, they will continue to import them from outside, right? So, thank you.
Yeah, I think the question raised on the cupboard, I think it's a pertinent question. I don't know those who are in this room who have been following us on our website, on our media. We've been posting. We did an assessment again through support from Trademark, looking at the sector that were heavily impacted by COVID: manufacturing, tourism, transport and logistics. We did a deep dive study on that, and we are like, these are the sectors that have been heavily affected by COVID. So what we've done through our engagement, again working with EAC Secretariat, we've developed a recovery strategy for the entire EAC to boost or rejuvenate those sectors that were heavily affected. And what we are doing at the EABC is not only raising the awareness, but we have also engaged a number of banks. Last week we were with the CEO of Equity. Is putting forward $6 billion US, a kind of a soft loan to help some of the sectors, especially SMEs, to recover from the effect of COVID. I've also approached a number of banks, like we are working with Flexim Bank, we are working with KCB Bank and other banks. And I've seen like Rwanda, those who are coming from Rwanda, they have a program, a $100 million program to support the manufacturing sector to recover. It's called Manufacturing Pro. My friend from Rwanda, what is that? Because last week I participated in the web and they say $100 million to support their manufacturing sector. They have manufacture to recover and build the program. That is working. That is working, and I know even in Uganda, a number of banks are put together as stimulus package to help companies to recover from the effects of COVID. The same applies to Kenya, and also the same applies to Tanzania. But what we also pushing is in terms of domestic tax, reduction in terms of taxes. We are pushing hard to have some tax rebates for those sectors that were heavily affected by COVID. So there are a number of initiatives we are putting in place to support our farms, to support our businesses to recover back better, build back better from the effect of COVID. So that's what we are doing. But again, I wanted to quickly respond to the question raised by.
Okay. Sorry, just to add on what Mr. Kalisa has said, and to maybe just stress the point around resilience. Recovery is important, but again, pandemics, droughts, these things keep coming up, and every time there's a different recovery mechanism. So the bigger picture becomes resilience. How do we then look at it from strengthening our systems, improving our production, so that whatever comes out, we are able to detect it early. So early monitoring and detection mechanisms become quite useful. And that's something possibly that the private sector can then push for. The other thing that just to put on what you mentioned around access to finance and all the incentives that have been given, perhaps one important thing that EABC could do for the private sector is do an assessment to look at the uptake. Because what we see is that there are a lot of facilities out there, but the uptake from the private sector remains low, either because of requirements for you to actually get the money, or how long it takes to get that money. And then that becomes an advocacy avenue because we have all these tools that sometimes are not really useful, that you don't benefit from. But we keep saying you can access 100 million from AfCFTA Bank, you can access from equity, but then what's really happening on the ground is that that doesn't really translate to actual financing for the private sector. So doing something that looks at what are the challenges, the barriers, and then pushing for to make sure that the products that are being developed are fit for purpose to support resilience against shocks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anantaya. And I think just to add to what Anantaya is saying, we've done last week. We had a trade finance webinar, well attended, and it was recommended that EABC should dive deep and assessing why it is very hard to access finance. These instruments are there, but they are not accessible. So I think I will agree with you. We are going to do assessment and engaging the banks and also engaging the players to see how we address those issues related to access to finance. I want also to respond to my good sister from Kenya Association of Manufacturers in terms of the NTBs. Again, this has been a challenge at the EAC. Even before we go to a continental level, our intra-regional trade is hampered by numerous margin NTBs. So what we've been doing and engaging again through our government partner framework is to reactivate trade remedy committee. And maybe I'll also see that trade remedy committee is infused under the dispute settlement, a mechanism that has been put in place by the CFTA. So I had a discussion with the SG. He's very keen and he's also pro private sector. He's supporting private sector. He said he had wants that trade remedy committee to work. Recently, there's also a revised, Adrian can confirm, there's a revised NTP Act. Generally, to give you an update that we had certain NTPs, so far 20 have been resolved. And through that engagement, we have a technical group between the EABC and the EAC where we are dialoguing, where we are discussing those NTPs that have highest impact on trade. We are now quantifying, we are moving from just reporting, but quantifying the effect of those NTP on trade. So there are various instruments we are putting in place to ensure that some of the emerging NTPs are resolved. Lastly, is the issue raised by my good friend Dr. Nyantai, and I always speak from his wisdom. He has been on the ESC, supporting ESC, and recently supported the EABC strategy. But the issue of trust is very critical. And I think that is the. Yesterday, I was engaging with someone from the World Bank, and this is really a strong message that I've got. He said, why East Africa, African countries are not growing? Trade costs have gone down because of the infrastructure, one-stop border posts, ports, and even engagement. But there are two important barriers he mentioned: people-to-people barrier. That is the whether you have tools, whether you have infrastructure, as long as the people are not communicating, because people barrier, and what we call knowledge transfer, knowledge movement across borders, how people can move from one border to another to learn and share ideas. That's the biggest challenge in Africa. Then another one is the communication cost is still higher than at the EAC level. He said those barriers, the trade cost is not about the infrastructure, it's about people-to-people barrier, and also these things are the ones that lead in our mutual relationship. And I think that's why we are here. I've realized that in my new role that even the barriers are not generated by government, some are generated by the private sector. The players themselves, you elect NTP against your brother. That is the biggest issue now. It's no longer the government, but you go and lobby your president, say, we don't want eggs from Uganda. They are killing our. And now that the politician, they want votes, they will listen to you. So these are the issues we need to address. That is the issue of mindset, the issue of cooperation, the issue of coordination, the issue of engagement, how we share the information for the betterment of this region. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can have another round.
The last one?
Yes. Yeah, the last one. Maybe three.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Dennis from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Burundi. I have just one question. It's about the infrastructures. You know, we are speaking about these big markets, big continental markets. But today, even if I find some available products in Abidjan, very cheap, it's possible to bring them to work today. So what are you planning to do in terms of improving the connection, the railways, the roads, the air transport For example, for even Bujumbura today, to go to Kinshasa, we have to go via Nairobi or Addis. Frankly speaking, you make a circle, and how this market can work when the infrastructures are not there. Railways, air transport, roads, and so on. This is on a medium term or long term period. What are you planning to do to connect different countries? Because you can reduce NTVs, you can remove all on TVs, but if the infrastructures are not there, the, the, the market will not be operational. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you once again. My name is David from Safari Group. I have a question. I know you have briefly mentioned something to do with the trade remedies committees, but I just wanted to follow up with the fact that some countries have already made their own trade remedies agency. For example, Kenya has the Kenya Trade Remedies Agency. Other countries probably are in the process of developing their own. But the question is there a window to have an African agency which can handle that? And if not, then how is the trade remedies committees structured in such a way that it has some teeth when all this dumping and is happening in our countries? Are they strengthened in such a way that they can institute some anti-dumping and countervailing and safeguard measures?
Thank you very much. Also, I have two questions. As a trading policy advisor in the EABC, actually I'm seeking advice from African trade situation. We understand the EAC submitted its offer, tariff offer of the product category A, where they are seeking liberalization for 10 years. But now EAC has come up with a comprehensive review, and we come up with new EAC card effective from July. And there is some product actually which has been moved from maybe they were 25, now they are 35. And when you see the tariff offer, it's like it will be a different. I just give you an example. Like a meat product, the tariff was at EAC was 25 when they were 30. Now they are saying it will be 35. What EAC is supposed to do is there any window to do the as well? Another way to go to Anatali, because that the Africa continent we have seen a very good progress in terms of coming up with even side. So as I was asking the trademark, is it possible also to assist the ESC, the EABC to come up with an e-tariff book for ESC? Because it's very important book, and most of the time, many people ask tariff to line of the second product, and you have more than 5,000 tariff lines, and sometimes very difficult to give explanation to our members. Okay, those were my two questions. I thought we are done.
Thank you very much. My name is I don't know that you could be the right person to do this. So my name is Mohammed Zone, and I'm the head of policy to development insurance association. Mine is about the settlement system of the African continental level. I give an example right, from where we are. We still have challenges, especially when we are trying to do transactions. we were doing them through the commercial banks. So I have an account in Equity Uganda, and I can be able to buy products from Kenya. And I can withdraw money from Equity Kenya, and I will be able to buy the product, or I can do a transfer from the Uganda shilling to the Kenya shilling. However, each bank, each commercial bank has a different rate at which it changes the money. So what is that special about the African settlement system that makes it cheaper, or does it still have the same challenges that you have at the EAC level? And secondly, do you hedge the currency of the US dollar, or what is that mitigation system that you use to hedge that currency, assuming I'm changing from Uganda shilling to the cedi? So what is that? What currency are you hedging on, or what is that instrument that we're using to hedge?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the statements which has been made by the Secretary from AfCFTA. I was just thinking around looking at the African countries, how are we positioning ourselves to produce products which I think every country is importing some products from outside, maybe from Asian countries or European or American countries. I'm just thinking on how are we positioned to make sure that that import gaps is bridged when we are integrating ourselves among our African countries. For example, I think the EAC member states have their products importing from outside, and the other regional economic integration blocks. Now, how are we positioned to make sure the product which maybe Tanzania is importing from China can be produced by a certain country in the other regional bloc, to ensure that we cover that importation gaps? For example, we know now we are facing some crises on some products which we have been importing from Russia and Ukraine. That can be one of the learning lessons to make sure that our African countries can be positioned to make sure the products which have been imported from those countries can be produced in Africa. We know there are some interaction when we are positioning ourselves, organizing ourselves to ensure we can trade amongst each other. But we have also an interaction from outside the African countries. How are we positioned to make sure that we can overcome those interactions, but also we can also produce the products from our own countries to ensure that we can produce for Tanzania? Maybe we are producing oils, we are producing edible oil, then we cover those gaps from those gaps, product gaps which are needed by the other country. I can see we can put all efforts, but we have interruptions from those countries, from China, from America, from Europe. Then how our regional organizations are positioned to ensure that our countries cannot be interrupted in that way. Thank you.
Yes.
This will be brief and direct. Manufacturers.
I am happy that you said East Africa is used as an example when doing the EABC-TMEA. As East Africa, when we are handling the EABC-TMEA, we are handling as a block. Are we thinking about carrying out a label to label us as East Africa, especially for our products, so that when that particular product reaches there, it is seen as EAC? and we market our products as East Africa. I think this is something that we should think about. And the second one, you talked about if manufacturers have capacity to supply and supply enough. But I'm not hearing you talking about the support given to the industries so that they are able to take up that particular market. I think it would be good for us also to hear that support that manufacturers require so that, because it needs expansion, it needs everything that is required, and it needs investments and the rest. So it will be good also for us to hear the support that actually it will be given to industries to take up that particular market. My last one, okay, don't take it. Last, is on the matters of forest laws. The imported goods coming from outside. How are we going to ensure that we actually protect our market? Currently, it is affecting us. It is getting into our market. It is eating up our market. Then how do we ensure that actually we protect our market the way it is supposed to be protected, and we take it up? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, this point from our
Good. Of course, some of the questions don't have answers. They have no reflection. Then let me start with this one of infrastructure, because infrastructure is a concern for everyone on the continent. And there are many efforts that are going on to improve infrastructure on the continent. The private sector has launched an initiative, I have heard about it, I think 3 years ago, called $1 trillion on infrastructure development in Africa. If you have heard of Afro Champions, let Ali Mufuriki was the vice chairman of Afro Champions, and they had pledged to mobilize up to $2 trillion US for infrastructure development of the continent. How they will do it, I will not answer because they have a comprehensive roadmap on how to mobilize those resources, because they believe private sector can mobilize resources to build infrastructure on the continent. On our side, we know infrastructure, industrialization are the 2 pillars of the AfCFTA. All efforts that we are making, either to mobilize resources or to work with partners, is to make sure that Africa industrializes, to make sure that Africa improves infrastructure. When it comes to hard infrastructure, building roads, railway, there is a lot of work that has to be done in governments and our financial institutions, or development financial institutions like African Development Bank, of course the World Bank. Those are our banks, even if they are global banks, but they still operate everywhere. And of course, national governments within their budgets, which they get from you through taxes, and then the partnerships with also business people. So there are a lot of efforts that can be made to improve hard infrastructure on the continent, depending on how we collaborate amongst ourselves. But within AfCFTA, we are working on soft infrastructure. I think Trademark East Africa. I did not mention that we have now started calling it Trademark Africa. So we no longer call them Trademark East Africa. So if you get jealous, we are calling them Trademark Africa. In the month of March, we were in London to advocate for trademark to become Trademark Africa from the FCDO. So we said, give them a lot of money. They have made impact in East Africa. We need them to cover the whole continent, and I think that will be done. And even next week, I think our Secretary General is meeting the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister Jelly, on the margin of the common development. One of the things that we mentioned is again to make trademark East Africa trademark. They are already working in West Africa on the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, and one of the things that have helped is to improve soft infrastructure, which is related to efficiency along trade corridors, which can reduce the costs and the delays of doing business along trade corridors. And currently, it has been already approved that we have to take the corridor approaches across the continent. We improve the northern corridor, the central corridor. We identify corridors that are very important and then work on each of them. We mobilize resources to improve the efficiency of customs, ports, borders, and so on, to make sure that business across African countries is going to be made much easier. So both initiatives are there to improve soft infrastructure and also mobilize resources for hard infrastructure. But I mean, the private sector also has to have that debate seriously and see how much can we contribute to build our hard infrastructure. The question on trade remedies. Yes, we have trade remedies committees. There is one thing that we acknowledge. In Africa, we do not have capacity for trade remedies. That's why Africa has been a victim of dumping. It's because we don't have capacity at two levels. We don't have legislation. You go to the market, you find the market is full of Chinese products, and all of them do not meet the standards. But because you don't have regulations in place, what are you going to do with them? You just consume them. And if you are competing with them, then what are you going to do? Because the government has not put in place regulations to deal with them. They don't have experts who can go and litigate China in WTO for having affected African market. The only two countries in Africa that have succeeded is Egypt and South Africa. They are the ones that can protect their market from dumping and those other measures that protect their market. So there is no continental body that has been established where through the AfCFTA we are strengthening the national regulations on trade remedies, and then the committees that have been put in place will have to undertake capacity building process for them to understand. Because these are legal issues. They are legal issues, they involve a lot of work, investigations, fact. And when you are litigating such a case in an international court, you have to prove it with the facts. We are not going to litigate China in AfCFTA dispute settlement. The AfCFTA dispute settlement is for AfCFTA state parties, for African countries. But when it comes to products from outside, we have to be able to go and deal with the cases at WTO. So if we don't have that capacity on the continent, we become victim. And I think this also is also related to the other question that has been asked on how are we protecting our market. Tariff alone cannot protect your market. You have to deal with that competitive practices which most of those countries have been using to dump our market. And this is a serious challenge which we can only resolve through trade remedies. For the first time, we have this kind of rule for the continent. We have a comprehensive legal instrument on trade remedies within the AfCFTA. I think that's the first step that we have made. We now need to build the capacity of our people to enforce those measures that have been put in place, to make them understand what the issues are and how do they cost our economy. And I think there's a huge cost, very huge. I think that's what has kept Africa behind other parts of the world. The question on ESC tariff offer, I discussed this with the Director of Customs in the last week. Actually, she asked me the same question. Experts can explain how this can be done, but my understanding is that if ESC has made its own tariff offer based on the 3 tariff bands, and each product has been categorized, let's say meat has been categorized under 90%, and the tariff today for meat is being reduced over a period of 10 years. If the tariff has increased from today, 25 to 35, I think the only issue that will happen is that the time it takes will not change, the product will not change, the impact is what will change. It means you reduce 10% of 25, but because you have moved to 35, then you will reduce 10% of 35, and so on. I have requested them to look for experts. I hope they will look for set to do extrapolation, to take the tariff offer that they have submitted, and then do some of the econometrics in the computer and extrapolate, align each product to the new tariff band that has been agreed once the tariff band is approved. The requirement of AfCFTA was to make tariff submission based on applied rates in 2019 as base year. So having met that requirement is good for AfCFTA. And those tariff offers are subject to periodic review every 5 years. So I'm quite sure after 5 years, then ESC will come back and say, we have reviewed our tariff band, this is the new offer that we are now putting on the table. But if they can trade with the current one within the FCA, there's no problem with that. Legally speaking, they will be compliant. But if they want to immediately enforce their 4 tariff band, then they will have to go through a review process, which they will have to submit again to FCFTA. The gentleman who explained the payment and settlement system, 2 technical questions. One, how is it done? They have been working with commercial banks. And the second, is the settlement hedged on US dollar or which currency? This is very technical. When a settlement is being made, nobody knows because it's between the central banks. The Pan-African payment settlement system has been put in place for central banks to collaborate amongst themselves. The central banks are the regulators of any commercial any financial transaction. So what they do, they have agreed on the criteria for convertibility. Instead of having South African rand being converted to the US dollar, and then the US dollar being converted to Kenyan shilling, the 2 governors of central bank in Kenya and South Africa will have a formula that will make South African rand directly convertible to Kenyan shilling. That formula, they will have a way of doing it. The way they calculate, for example, interest rate. There are many variables that determine the interest rate. But at the end, you as the consumer will be told this is the interest rate. When you go to the Forex Bureau, they will tell you today's exchange rate is this one. You don't know how it has been calculated, but there are so many variables. So the first step will be to agree on the variables that will be put in that basket, and then the exchange rate will come automatically. And it will come on daily basis between all African currencies without hedging it on any other foreign currency. And the value of the currency is based on the economy. So this means that even if the dollar loses value, it will not necessarily affect the compatibility of African currency within the Pan-African payment and settlement system. That's number one. Number two, the way it is done, we don't even have to know it. What we have to know is that it will be done within 24 hours, and then it will be cheaper than the current practice. If today you want to pay, 20,000 Kenyan shilling in Kenya, how much do you pay in the rand in South Africa after having converted the rand to US dollar and then convert back US dollar to Kenyan shilling? When you use the PAPS, you will pay less rand to get 20,000 Kenyan shilling paid in Kenya. That's what the business person is interested in. When you go to make a transfer at the bank, you fill a form, then the amount you are paying and the amount you are charged are different. The recipient will receive less money than you have been charged on your account. So where does the balance go? It goes there in the transaction cost. So what will be interesting with the PAPS is to realize at the end that PAPS has reduced that cost. And that's what is important for us. We don't know what will happen in the process, but time will be minimum and the cost will also be reduced. I think the issue of imports disruption, I have already responded to it. Tariff alone will not make us competitive. There are three things that have to be done. Of course, tariff is one. The second one is to deal with those anti-competitive practices, the dumping and other products that do not meet requirements, but which we find on the market. And the third one, which I think now a trademark will speak to, is to improve our competitiveness. Because in business, it's all about competition. You produce and someone else produces. If your cost of production is high, you will not be able to sell your products on the market. So there will be a number of activities to improve our competitiveness at national level, at regional level, and so on. And JB will respond to Made in East Africa if there is a plan to label EAC products as made in EAC. That's a marketing strategy. Let me briefly talk about the support that is given to the industries. In this AfCFTA process, we have undertaken an extra mile, which is part of our mandate, but which is not the main mandate. We have developed the AfCFTA private sector engagement strategy. And part of that strategy is to identify the priority sectors where we can focus in industrializing the continent, making the impact, and also producing positive externalities, if I may call. If, for example, you develop a whole automotive industry on the continent, the impact that it will have, because the auto industry is the most job-creating industry that we have identified on the continent. But because now all Africans are busy importing second-hand car, we do not know the potential of developing auto industry on the continent. Once Africa starts producing its own brand new cars, you are going to see increase in job creation. You are going to see many SMEs that are going to find a market on the continent. One of the example in South Africa is Lesotho. Lesotho is within South Africa, and it is within it is surrounded by South Africa. So when they were putting in place a customs union, they thought they are going to be swallowed by South Africa, their economy is going to be affected, whatever. But because South Africa auto industry was developed, they only focused on one value chain to fit into the auto industry by producing leather for the car seats. And that industry alone has boosted the GDP of Lesotho because they were in the middle of an industrialized country, and then they were facilitated to be part of the value chain of that industrialized country. So if we look at it from that perspective, we look at agribusiness, we make sure no one is importing food from outside, we make sure all our farmers are producing, adding value to their products, feeding into big food industries across the continent, then you are going to see impact. If you develop pharmaceutical industry, there will be a lot of impact. We have spoken about transport and logistics. I'm surprised when I see all the containers coming all over the continent. None of them is Africa. All the containers, everything, they belong to someone else. And we're able to do that. It's just about transport and logistics. So what went wrong? It's just for us to strategize and see how we can invest in those sectors. So once we have identified those sectors, we have spoken to financial institutions. AfCFTA Bank is willing to provide funding for those who will be investing in priority industries for the continent because they see the impact. So I would just like to tell you that the support is there. Financial institutions are being mobilized. They're actually pledging resources. There is a number of, was it $41 billion deal that was made in the last Inter-African Trade Fair, because those banks are interested in funding projects on the continent that will boost industrialization. So you just have to fit into the priority sectors that will make impact. The moment you link your project to the AfCFTA, the banks will jump on it. We spoke with the CEO Equity Bank last week. It was in Arusha. I think he pledged, was it 20 something, 26 billion US dollar that is going to support SMEs on the continent. And we are now developing a program with the AfCFTA to see how that money can make impact across the entire continent by mainly focusing on the key priority areas of industrialization for the continent. So that's how we are doing. We try as much as we can to mobilize financial institutions, and then through Inter-African Trade Fair, we will link them with the private sector. So that's what I can say about it. It's a long journey, but we are working on it.
So I'll start off with the question around the tariff. I think that's something we can have on the list and see how we support both at a base level, but also the dissemination of the tariff and the FTA. Because for us, we have the private sector is really good to understand what the government has put forth in terms of tariff. Then to pick up on what the previous just mentioned around the development of regional value chain, I think what's lacking, even with the access to finance, is the clarity on the opportunities. Because for us, even with EABC, I think what we kind of push them towards is how do you support the market intelligence? Because as I think Maria mentioned, there's opportunities there, but as a business, you're already investing so much in your current ongoing business, that cost of expansion is quite high. And if you're able to get technical support to assist you in understanding this is where the opportunity is, for example, in Asia, this is how I could be competitive in terms of the comparison with what's being produced in the local market, and then how do we then assist you to actually physically get your goods out to the market. The starting point becomes that market intelligence and clarity on what the opportunity is, both from a regional value chain perspective, because you have to see yourself in that regional value chain for you to know what your contribution is. And what we're trying to push within trademark is the clustering approach. Don't look at cotton and textiles, for example, as the end garments in itself as where I am competitive. It could be the same as what Lesotho has done, focus on leather, because that's where you're competitive, that's where you're most productive. Because the issue we face with the ESG and advocating for regional value chains is the fact that we all produce the same things. We are all targeting the same investors to invest, and yet we are not all competitive in that production area. So if we are able to collectively agree and say, the cotton production, taking example Tanzania, does very well, their climate condition is what fits the mark. Let's then focus on putting our resources there to boost the productivity, and then look at what else Rwanda contributes to that regional value chain. Because without that, we'll continue with the same practice of let's all push for the same strategic sectors, yet we are not all competitive in this sector. Then around infrastructure development, Prudence has mentioned trademarks, investment in infrastructure. So there is both the soft and the hard infrastructure. And unfortunately, what we are seeing as the trend with development partners is that the basket, the family basket is becoming smaller. And when you go to the public sector side, there are high levels of debt. So the amount of spending power that is there to invest in infrastructure is shrinking. So the approach that is more sustainable is how do we foster public partnerships. By doing that, trademark over the next few months we will be launching in the framework of Trademark Africa, Trade Connect Africa, which is a commercial arm of Trademark East Africa, and then looks at focusing on providing technical assistance for development of project pipeline. Because at the end of the day, the needs are quite many and the resources are very small. So how do we prioritize and how do we ensure that when you have the investment forum that we go prepare with funding ready projects? You know, a project that an investor is able to assess there and then and say, is this something that is viable and something that I can fund? Because that for us is looking at it holistically. We might not be able to contribute financially, but we could be able to contribute by identifying the viability of some of the products and how then we bring in private sector participation and investment in infrastructure. Then when it comes to air transport, that's a priority focus, not just for the ESG, but as we go into making this FTA a reality. EABC with support from trademark is looking at addressing office kind issues. The biggest problem with aircraft is taxes that are being imposed that then drive the cost higher. So EABC, I think maybe Mr. Kalisa can speak to that on what their intention is and what their advocacy agenda is to kind of drive down the cost of aircraft to then facilitate movement of people. And lastly, it's how we then also move into intermodal transport opportunities. So looking at it from road, rail, sea, and the interconnectivity. So Kenya is a very good, has a very good case of sea, rail, and road with the investments in the SDI, and then how you try to reduce transport costs by looking or strengthening the connectivity between the different modes of transport. So if that then works, that's not something that's able to give variable options for transport and movement of goods and people across the continent. Hinging that with the assumption that a lot of the infrastructure development will be financed and therefore it will be easier for people to move across this.
Yeah, thank you. I think our colleagues have adequately responded to a number of questions raised, and I really want to appreciate them. On infrastructure development, I want just to add and echo what Prudence mentioned. There is a standalone project on infrastructure development, a standalone strategy. It is called PDIA. It's a strategy developed at the continental level to support the CFTA, implementation of CFTA, looking specifically at infrastructure. And I'm happy to say that African Development Bank is taking the lead on that, and they're ready to commit, mobilize resources in terms of infrastructure development. At the EAC, we also have a strategy on infrastructure development, and as Natalia said, we are looking at multimodal means of transport, rail, road, looking at airfare. Currently, the study we're undertaking as the EABC is that we're looking at the drivers of the cost of flying. For instance, when the babies from Burundi to come to here, I find they are paying $600 the ticket. The same ticket from Burundi to Europe is the same amount. The driver of the cost is landing charges, taxes imposed on our own airlines. It's not about investment. We have our countries have invested. We have Rwanda Air, we have Tanzania Air, we have Uganda Air. Right? And that's what we call cutthroat competition that is not helping anyone. Right? We are imposing restrictions on our own airlines. Right? That's what drives the cost. The same for the product. My view that we have sufficient good products, but it's really unfortunate and a challenge to see that we want even not promote our neighbor's product, we rather promote Chinese product. So yeah, I'm telling you, people prefer to buy milk from either China. I saw that there's even fish from China, other than eating fish from Lake Victoria. So it's a mindset issue I think we need to address. It's not about we are lacking goods, quality products. It's about how we want to trade, how we trust each other. The NTB that are coming, as I mentioned, they are coming from within the region. They are not imported, they are not brought by Chinese. I was engaging executive director. We have a competition, very strong competition process, yes. But I know that it's been implemented. And it has all those instruments in terms of counterfeits, in terms of the relatives, how we protect our legally produced product. Those instruments are there. Another point that's why we are here is rules of origin. The purpose of the primary essence of rules of origin is not only to identify a product, but to prevent what we call transshipment. So that the goods produced within the continent are enjoying the same brief. They are the one enjoying the brief. The current situation you see that even Chinese products are enjoying common external tariffs than EAC products. So that's the challenge. It's a challenge, and that's why we need to really the issue is not infrastructure, the issue is not the system, but the issue is within us and can be addressed within ourselves. So we can probably try to put in place tools and systems to address that. So I really am calling upon everyone, let's work together. Let's strengthen what we call trade information portal. Let's share information, and we have those portals that are supported by trademark and but we are not trained them to look at what are those administrative barriers that impede our trade, impede the movement of the services. We have those tools. We used to have a common market scorecard. I don't know where it died to assess who is there, who is impacting on who. So let's reactivate those instruments and let's make trade happen. And it will happen. There is that what going. There is a commitment from our government partners. There is a commitment from our agencies and organizations like EABC that are ready to support you. But let's work together and share this information. That's what I wanted to add on. Thank you.